like this today, just for fun, because this is the way we used to dress in the army, and these are the medals. I have to admit, none of these are for bravery, but they're all because I was in certain campaigns. Like a desert campaign, this Italian campaign, and like that kind of thing, you see. I was in the Second World War, and it's necessary for you to know what went on in those days, because when I was 16 at Auckland Grammar School, our history master said to me, there's going to be another war, and you boys are going to be in it. Now, I think that was pretty rough of that history master to say that, but it was perfectly true, because within 5 years, there was another war, and we were in it. And for 4 years, we went across to the Middle East, and you know what they call the Middle East, it's all over here. And that's what I've come to tell you about, the war that we were in and why it happened. Now, why was he so sure there's going to be another war? Because, well, this is a bayonet, and that's what they used to put on the end of the rifles and stick them in. Awful looking thing, isn't it? War is a horrible thing. Up here in Russia, there was a man named Stalin, who was the dictator of Russia. He wanted to rule the world. In Germany there was Hitler, and in Mussolini there was Italy. And they wanted to rule the world too. Way over here in Japan, there's the Emperor Hirohito, and he wanted to rule the Pacific. And if the Americans had not come into the war, this country would have been ruled by Japan today. And we are a free country because the Americans came in, and they beat the Japanese in the Pacific. But when I was at school, 1934, this history teacher knew that Hitler was rearming after the First World War and building up his army with the intention of attacking France and England to begin with, and then to take over the whole of Europe, and then Russia, and eventually he had the objective of ruling the whole world. And it was a frightening time. You are very lucky. You live in a wonderful time when you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. But it was frightening for us because he was very powerful and he had some very good equipment. Well, in 1939, war was declared because he had gone into Poland, Hitler had gone into Poland, and Britain had a treaty with Poland that if Poland was attacked, then Britain would come in. And so Britain and France then attacked Hitler, and Hitler then started to attack England with the objective of invading it. So the first thing they started to do was bomb England and London and all the ports around here. However, the British were so good, the British Air Force, the Royal Air Force, was so good, with a lot of New Zealanders, and the head of the air group was Sir Keith Park, who happened to be a New Zealander. The New Zealanders played a very important part. The Air Force stopped them from invading. So Hitler then gave up the idea of invading England, and he turned his attention on Russia with the idea of taking Russia. It was a big mistake. So he went over there. Now that was in 1940. And from then on, there was no land fighting here at all until 1944, when they had the big D-Day landing, and the British and the USA and the Canadians and others landed and eventually fought. But, so what's the New Zealanders' role in all this? The New Zealanders, at the time, let me get the figures right, in 1939, our army had 600 people in it. A tiny wee little army. It was hardly ready for anything at all. But there were 10,000 part-time soldiers called territorials. They still have them, territorials. And the British and the New Zealand government decided to send 6,000 of those across to England to help England fight off the Germans. But what they heard was that Hitler had decided to come down here and come through Greece and eventually perhaps through Turkey and to take the Suez Canal and all the Middle East oil. So the first New Zealanders to go across, instead of being sent to England, were sent to the Middle East. And they were landed at a place called Tufik here, landed here, and then for the next 2 years, something like 50,000 New Zealanders poured into Egypt, and the base was at a place called Maadi, M-A-A-D-I. Now you might see some streets called Maadi. There's a Maadi place somewhere, and you wonder why. Also they're called Maadi, because Maadi was our big camp. It was a huge camp. It was outside Cairo. And Mussolini, from Italy here, had already taken over Libya. He had invaded Libya, and he decided he would like to have Egypt too. And so he attacked, from this border here, attacked Egypt. But the Italians are not good soldiers, and the British easily pushed them back over here. The Germans at that time thought, well, we'll send troops in, and they sent troops into this place called Benghazi, and they attacked. And so we were fighting these Germans, and they would win sometimes, and we would send. For a couple of years there, it was backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, and nobody was winning anything. Then the British heard, first of all, New Zealanders had been sent to Greece to stop the Germans coming down through the Greece under Crete and eventually across here. But the Germans were far too strong, and they kicked them out to Crete. And then they bombed them in Crete, and they kicked them out, and they had to get them to come back to Cairo. So that for the first 2 years of the war, everything was going wrong as far as we were concerned. The Germans had kicked the troops out of here, out of France, and pushed them back. But there was a very clear feeling in Britain that God was on our side. And the first reason was because at Dunkirk, a place called Dunkirk here, all the British Army had to retreat onto the beaches, and Britain called for anybody who had a boat who could go across the channel, and there were ferry boats and cargo boats and launches and yachts, and they poured across the channel here in their hundreds and thousands, and they picked up 6 soldiers, 20 soldiers, 50 soldiers, whoever they could, and they evacuated most of the army, and it was a calm day. The British Channel is not usually calm, and it was a calm day, and these troops were saved very wonderfully. Now the next thing that happened was over here in Poland, the Poles discovered a machine like a typewriter, a big typewriter, which had a code in it. It was called the Enigma. And the Germans had invented this machine for sending secret codes, all their messages out from the headquarters in Berlin to their army anywhere, went out in code, so that you couldn't read it unless you knew what the code was. And this machine was the machine they used for sending out the codes. Unknown to the Germans, one of their machines had been found and sent to England, and the English worked on it and discovered it worked, so that they were able to listen on the radio to all the codes that were being sent out, and they knew exactly what the Germans were doing. And when they're going to send the troops here, when they're going to send the troops here. Wonderful thing. And if that hadn't happened, the war might have been very different. So they knew that when Hitler had decided to give up the invasion of England and go to Russia, then they heard that Hitler had decided to come down here into Greece. And so our troops, instead of being sent to England, were sent to Egypt and then across from Egypt into Greece. But it was a bad move, like Gallipoli. It was a bad move. It should have never been done because we didn't have the strength to fight their army. Everything had to be fed by sea, whereas the Germans could feed them by land all the way. And the Germans just chased our troops out to Crete, and then from Crete we were chased out back into Egypt. And then for the next 2 years we fought the battle in this desert. Now the desert here, you see pictures of desert with lovely sand dunes and all soft sand and looks all very beautiful. On the North Africa it is not beautiful like that, it is just dry land. And a lot of it is stony too, and most of it is hard. And so all across here is all hard land, and there's only one road going from Alexandria right along here through Benghazi, and the road comes down here right through to Tripoli. One road. And the army, and all the troops, all the machines, all the vehicles had to go up this one road. And so it was very soon, it was very badly potholed, and it was easier to drive out in the desert than it was along the road. So that 105,000 New Zealand young men and women served in the Middle East, besides thousands more who served with the Navy and Air Force. Of that 105,000, 8,000 were killed. That's worth remembering, take note. 105,000 New Zealand young men and women served, but 8,000 were killed, 18,000 were wounded, and others hospitalized. In July 1941, I arrived in Egypt. That was just 2 years after the war started, with what's called the 6th Reinforcements. And I was attached to an infantry battalion. I was not actually a fighting soldier. In every battalion they have a doctor, which we call a medical officer, and a chaplain, which is the minister, and a welfare officer. Those three officers are not fighting, or called non-combatant. And I was the welfare officer with this infantry battalion, and we went wherever the infantry battalion went, we went too. So we were fighting in the Middle East here when the British heard through the Enigma code machine that the Germans had decided that they would come through here, through Turkey, and down here to take the Suez Canal from this side instead of trying to take it from that side, because they didn't seem to have any success. So they sent us up through here to the top of Syria, and they spread us out along this line here, and they said to us, when the Germans come through, you must fight a delaying action, hold them up as much as you possibly can, and retreat gradually, slowly down, until you get into Palestine, where the 8th Army will build the fences at a valley called Megiddo. We thought it was the Battle of Armageddon, which was too complicated to go into. But we were up there having a wonderful time because the Germans didn't come through, and we were out of the war. But suddenly, Rommel, the German general, attacked from here and pushed the British Army back almost to Alexandria, here, 70 miles from Alexandria. And so the command came to the New Zealanders who are up here, come back immediately, don't stop, come back, keep going. And we rushed down here, came back here, and met up with the German forces at a place called Mersematru, which is about here. Now, the first night, the General Freiberg, our general, decided to form the division, which was about 20,000 men, into what they called a box. You see, in the desert it's just all open land, and it's not like it was in the First World War. They had a whole lot of trench warfare and you knew where the front line was. It was very much like a sea battle, in that the tanks were like boats. They could go anywhere all over the place, and you never quite knew where the enemy was. So his plan was to form this box. He put them in a square with everything, all the guns and everything, tanks facing upwards, with the objective that if the Germans came along, they would be scared to go past that box because we would attack them from behind. So when the Germans found we were there, the first night they surrounded the whole division, and Rommel really thought he'd got the whole New Zealand division trapped, and he had. It was a very serious situation, and if they had captured us, it would have changed the whole direction of the war. But that night, General Freiberg said, we're not going to let them beat us, we're going to break through tonight. And we did. We broke through out, and we found some of the German officers even in their pyjamas. We never used pyjamas, we used to sleep in our singlets and underpants. That's all we did. But these Germans were in their pyjamas, and they got a terrible fight. They never expected, they don't like fighting at night actually, and they didn't expect to be attacked at night. And the whole division, hardly anybody was taken prisoner, and the whole division got out. And we had to retire back a few miles, and we formed another box. So they came up, in a couple of days' time they came up and attacked us again, so we retired again and made another box, and then retired until we got back to a place called Alamein. Alamein is just very close. It's about 70 miles from Alexandria here, and it has become a very important place. We stopped them at Alamein. Now the British, the Commonwealth forces from New Zealand, Australia, India and South Africa were all sent into Egypt because we came through the Suez Canal. To keep the Suez Canal open, because all the supplies going into Britain were coming this way. Otherwise, they had to go right round the bottom of South Africa and up that way, and were subject to attack by submarines all the way. So we had to keep that Suez Canal open. So it was the Commonwealth Army, Indians, South Africans, Australians, and New Zealanders that were fighting in this war. And the next day when I was trying to find out where the division had got to, I had trouble with my truck and I was delayed. An English officer with the Indians came rushing up to me and said, "Where do you think you're going?" I said, "I'm going over to look for the New Zealanders. They're down south." He said, "Well, if you go over that hill, you go straight into the Germans." So he was very kindly stopped me from being captured. So when we got back to as far as Alamein and we stopped them, both armies were very exhausted, and for about 4 months they just sat there with no battles going on. There was artillery shells being fired and we were bombed and we were strafed, but there was no actual battle going on. Each side was building up its strength in order to engage again. The British sent out General Montgomery at this stage. General Montgomery became very famous. He became the top general in the British Army. And he went round to every division and said, "We are going to win." And he was very encouraging indeed. The Americans and the Canadians were building trucks by the thousand, and guns and equipment, and they were pouring into Egypt. So that October the 23rd, 1943, Montgomery was ready, and he attacked the Germans at Alamein, and it took 12 days for that battle to eventually overcome the Germans, and they retreated. And that was the first stage in 1943. That's 4 years after the war broke out. For 4 years, we had never had a victory. That's a long time. Everything had gone the Germans' way. They were successful. We were unsuccessful. But after 4 years, in October 23rd, 1943, we won the Battle of Alamein, and he had to retire. Now, what they tried to do, when the Germans retired back here, General Freiberg said, "Let's go down in behind them and come up in behind and cut them off." And we tried to do that time and time again, but every time they escaped us. And they escaped right along here, and we chased them right along here, right along here, right along here, past to Benghazi, right up to Tripoli. And we couldn't cut them off. Eventually, the Germans retired to a place here, to Bago Gap in Tunisia, and we went round the back of that, up the back here, and got in behind them. But once again, they got out, and they retreated right back here, right up into this cape here, Cape Bon, that's called. And the whole German army was pushed into that cape there, thousands of them, thousands of them. And that's where they were, the war finished, in the desert. That's 3,000 kilometres we chased them. It took us a week to drive back, and we were driving all day between sunrise and sunset to get back. It took me a week because I left the division and came back here to prepare the camp. But the whole army, it took a lot longer than that to come back, 3,000 kilometres. Well, we thought, they said we were going to be retrained and a whole lot of reinforcements were going to come from New Zealand, and we thought we were going to be sent to England for the big attack, which was going to come eventually landing into Europe. But when the Germans had been beaten in Tunisia, the Americans and the British went across from Cape Bon here into Sicily, and they went right across Sicily and then going into Italy, and they were halfway up Italy here when the Italians gave in. They didn't want Italy to be a battleground, so the king of the Italians gave in and capitulated. But Hitler was so furious